My name is Hannah Whitfield. I'm 36 years old. 11 days ago, I pulled into my grandmother's driveway to drop off her mail and saw a realtor's sign hammered into the front lawn, for sale. My hands were still on the wheel when my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Buyers loved it. Closing March 3rd. Don't make this weird, Hannah. What my family didn't know was that 4 years earlier, my grandmother had walked into the Hendricks County Recorder's office and quietly signed that house over to me, and they were 14 days away from selling a house they never owned. Before I go further, if this is already making your blood boil, take a second to like and subscribe, and drop your location and local time below. I read every comment. I'm Hannah. This is the story of how my family tried to sell my childhood home behind my back, and how one piece of paper they never bothered to check ended everything they thought they controlled. I grew up in that house on Maple Hollow Road. 2 stories, a wraparound porch, a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon because my grandmother Ruth baked every Sunday whether anyone came or not. My parents divided their time between their own place across town and Ruth's house, mostly to check in when it was convenient. I was the one who actually showed up every Tuesday after work, every Sunday morning before church, every time her hip acted up or her pill organizer got confusing. My sister Claire visited on holidays. My mother called it checking in from a distance, respecting grandma's independence. I called it what it was. Nobody wanted the unglamorous work, so I did it, and everyone let me, because it was easier to call me the sentimental one than to admit I was the only one who cared enough to be inconvenienced. In 2020, Ruth's memory started slipping. Small things first, forgetting she'd already eaten, calling me by my mother's name. I moved a folding cot into her guest room and stayed 3 nights a week. My mother said I was being dramatic. My father said Ruth was still sharp as a tack and mostly stayed away. Claire sent a fruit basket. That June, Ruth asked me to drive her to see her attorney, a quiet man named Walter Griggs, who'd handled her affairs for 30 years. She didn't tell me why. I sat in the waiting room while she went in alone. She came out 40 minutes later, patted my hand, and said, "This house remembers who stayed, Hannah. Now it knows for certain." I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought she meant it sentimentally. I didn't know she'd just signed a warranty deed transferring the house at 214 Maple Hollow Road to me, recorded that same afternoon at the Hendricks County Recorder's office. Document number 2020-11487. She never told my parents. She never told Claire. She told me it was just paperwork and asked me not to make a fuss. Ruth passed in September of 2023. The funeral was small. My mother cried beautifully in front of the relatives and complained about the catering afterward. Nobody mentioned the house directly, not at first. I assumed reasonably that everyone knew it would eventually pass through Ruth's estate and that the estate would sort out who owned what. What I didn't know was that my mother had already decided the house was hers to handle. In January, she told Claire over the phone that the market was hot right now and it made sense to list before spring. Neither of them called me. Neither of them checked the deed. They simply assumed that because Ruth was gone, the house defaulted to my parents as her children, the way most people assume things work when they've never bothered to read a single legal document in their lives. They listed it on February 20th with a realtor named Denise Holloway. Full asking price, an offer within 4 days. Closing scheduled for March 3rd, 11 days from the moment I saw that sign in the yard. I called my mother that night. She answered like I was interrupting something. "Mom, there's a for sale sign on Grandma's house." "I know, sweetie. Isn't it exciting? We got over asking. You didn't tell me you were selling it." Well, it needed to happen eventually. You're being emotional about a house, Hannah. It's just wood and drywall. I asked who the deed was in. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "It's in the family, obviously. Don't make this weird." I hung up and drove straight to the recorder's office the next morning. I already had a copy of the deed folded in the bottom of Ruth's old recipe box, tucked behind a card for a pecan pie. I'd found it 2 years earlier while helping her organize her files and never mentioned it, because Ruth had asked me not to. I pulled the official recorded copy that afternoon just to be certain. Document 2020-11487. Grantor Ruth Whitfield. Grantee Hannah Whitfield. Recorded, stamped, notarized 4 years before my mother ever called a realtor. My daughter Lily is 7. That week, she asked me at dinner why Grandma Ruth's house had a sign in the yard. "Are we losing Grandma's house, Mommy?" I told her, "No, sweetheart, we're not losing anything." She looked at me like she didn't quite believe it, the way kids do when they can tell the adults around them are worried about something they won't explain. I didn't call my mother again. I called Denise Holloway, the realtor, directly. I told her who I was and asked her to pull the title search her own office should have run before ever listing the property. She went quiet on the phone for a long moment, then said she'd call me back within the hour. She called back in 20 minutes. Her voice had changed completely. "Miss Whitfield, I need to speak with your parents immediately. There's a discrepancy in the chain of title." The closing was scheduled for a Monday. My mother called an emergency family meeting for the Saturday before at her house, assuming she was still in control of the conversation. Claire came, my father came, Denise came, folder in hand, because I'd asked her to. I brought the recorded deed. My mother started talking before anyone sat down, something about the buyers being anxious and needing everyone on the same page for Monday. Denise cut her off gently and said there was a problem with the title. My mother waved her hand and said there couldn't be. The house had been in the family for 60 years. I set the deed on the table. My father picked it up first. I watched his face change as he read the grantee line twice. My mother snatched it from him and read it out loud, her voice getting smaller with every word. Document number, recorded 2020, Grantee Hannah Whitfield. She looked up at me and said, "This isn't real." Denise, sitting right there, said quietly, "It's recorded with the county. It's very real." My mother's voice cracked into something ugly. "You let us plan a closing. You let us think." I said, "I let you tell me not to make it weird twice, while you sold a house that's never been yours to sell." Claire asked if Ruth had been of sound mind when she signed it, already reaching for the only argument left. Denise, still sitting there with her folder, said the transfer had been notarized and witnessed by Ruth's longtime attorney, the same one who'd represented her for 30 years, and that any challenge would need to go through probate court with very little chance of success. My father didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said quietly, "She never told us." I said, "She told me. She just knew which one of us would still be standing here Tuesday afternoons for 4 years. The sale collapsed that Monday. Denise called the buyer's agent and explained the title issue. My mother tried briefly to argue that I should simply let the sale go through and split the proceeds, as though the last 4 years of Tuesdays and Sundays and folding cots had been an investment she was owed a return on. I declined. I kept the house. I spent that spring repainting the porch the same yellow it had always been, and I moved the recipe box back into the kitchen where it belonged, pecan pie card and all. Claire didn't speak to me for 2 months. My mother sent one email in April calling me selfish for hijacking Grandma's legacy. I didn't respond to that one either. Lily asked me again, months later, sitting on that same porch, if the house was really ours now. I told her, yes, sweetheart, it always was. She thought about that for a second and said, because you stayed. I said, because I stayed. Some families measure love by who shows up for the will reading. Mine measured it by who showed up on the Tuesdays nobody was watching. My grandmother knew the difference long before the rest of us figured out there was one.